So, folks, we gotta talk about the fact that Elon Musk is, he's white supremacy posting again. He's Hitler posting again. Um, and it's not subtle at all. So, here's a screenshot. New Zealand is now just 55.9% European, census shows. Whites set to be a minority by 2028. And this is from Rothmus, Rothmus is a muse Elon Musk turns to, a white nationalist muse. Diversity and multiculturalism were always code for whites becoming minorities in every single country, city, and small village. A West ruled by foreigners who despise it in collusion with domestic enemies who equally abhor it. Its institutions occupied, its morality, blah, 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 blah. You get it. And Elon Musk, the doom of Western civilization must be averted. And again, for these guys, it all goes back to just birth rates and maintaining a status quo of white supremacy. That's it. That's it. New Zealand isn't even in Europe. Like a bunch of Europeans came to New Zealand. There were already people living there. But this entire situation, right, is entirely this idea that, well, if whites aren't the majority, whites will be eradicated. There will be a race war, right? Like, that's what they think. That's unironically what they think. They think the second there is a minority, majority, a minority becomes a majority of the population that isn't white, they think civilization will collapse. And as I looked at this, and as I thought about this, I remembered we haven't checked in with the natalists in a while. How are they doing? You know, they're the white nationalists who are super, super concerned about birth rates. And I thought maybe we could check out what they're doing. You know, the two obscenely wealthy people that got featured all over mainstream media for seemingly no reason. Because they're like, we're gonna have babies. And that was it. Well, let's check back in with them, right? They're pals. They're folks who also think along Elon Musk's lines. And I thought we'd
They
check
only
in with
fear
them.
minorities because they fear being treated the way they treat minorities.
Indeed, Nathan. Indeed. Now, this channel, for those of you who may have forgotten it, is titled Based Camp with Simone and Malcolm Collins. And, well, we're gonna check this out.
Nothing to add. Take my money.
Matthew H., thank you for the $20 Australian. And one of their more recent videos from a couple weeks ago, real fascism has never been tried. Fascism is socialism. Let's take a look, because I don't think they know what they're talking about, just based on title alone.
With you today. Today, we are going to be exploring a chain of logic that I jumped into based on a simple joke that caught my mind as I was walking around, which is real fascism has never been tried. And this joke came to me because I was thinking about real communism has never been tried. But as I started to follow this to its conclusion, what I came to realize, and we've talked about this before on this podcast, but I think through chasing this chain of logic, you can see it more completely.
Okay.
That the modern left is not only just fascist, like they are definitionally more fascist by the original definition of fascism when it was created.
Even this baby looks bored with what's being talked about.
Than either the Nazis or Mussolini was.
Okay, so our starting argument here is that the Nazis and Mussolini were not as fascist as the modern left in America. Is this AI? AI could never hallucinate something this unhinged.
But so not only are they more fascist, but there was a sort of dedicated campaign to rebrand fascism as something other than socialism. That's
because it is not socialism. Just to be upfront, Socialism is the transition of of an economy dominated by capital, i.e., capitalists own the factory that the workers work at, to simplify it down to a straightforward relationship. Socialism is when the workers own the factory that they labor in. This change of ownership fundamentally alters the nature of an economy. And when workers own their workplace and have the agency over their workplace to be able to, collectively within that workplace decide on wages, hierarchy, etc., that is a better mode of production. That is all socialism is at the end of the day. A lot of folks equate Stalinism, i.e., that authoritarian, top-down, planned economy style, with socialism. That's not socialism. The government seizing control of the factory just replaces one abstract owner with another. Either way, the workers at that factory are not owning that factory.
All fascism is, what I'm going to be arguing in this, is what we in modern times call socialism with ethnic overtones, ethnic class struggle.
Okay. Oh, God. Okay.
Is what I'm going to be arguing in this, is what we in modern times call socialism with ethnic overtones, ethnic class struggle overtones. And I will note here that people will be like, well, it's nationalistic ethnic overtones. And it's like, not really. The fascist movement was pan-national to an extent. And one of the really interesting things is when...
No, it was very different in each of its different contexts. One only has to examine Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany. They were very different in a number of key ways.
Ever I will talk to, I'll try to engage an AI on this topic or something like that.
Hell, you can even, throw in Spain as a comparison point.
Growing up, I was taught that government control of the means of production was communism. Somehow I don't think that's the case, though.
It is not. Communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society, and that's not government control.
I'll say, in what way was fascism not just socialism, right? And they'll say, well, fascism contained a lot of far-right elements. And I'll be like, name one. And this is the thing. It's not like it was...
The ethno-nationalism would be one. The lifting up of various economic capitalists would be another. The focus on militarism and expansionism in order to fuel the domestic economy would be another. The desire to acquire more land and resources in order to fuel domestic companies would be another. I don't know. I'm spitballing here. The eugenics would be another. The crackdown on LGBTQ people would be another. The eradication of unacceptable religious groups, another. Yeah, no, this is like the list goes on for a while here. I don't know. I think for another thing, one could look at any fascist currently active or active in the past and ask them if, hey, do you want to be communist? Do you like communism or do you like socialism? They would say no. It's why Hitler's Germany purged the communists and the socialists and the trade unionists.
Socialism mixed with far-right elements. It literally has not a single right-wing element as a component of it.
That's incorrect for all the reasons I just stated. I do need to tell you guys, I probably can't get through a full 56 minutes of this without bursting a vein, so we're going to see how much of this I can actually take. I do find these people insufferable.
Unless you say that racism is right-wing only when it's practiced by white people, which is a racist comment in and of itself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The embrace of racism as a political platform is an inherently conservative idea. And it's inherently conservative regardless of what ethnic group is doing it. That's not a difficult question to address.
So what I'll mean here is it will say like, oh, it was right-wing through things like anti-Semitism. And we'll go into the data on this, the original thinkers of the Marxist and socialist movement were far more explicitly anti-Semitic than literally, I think, the least anti.
Also, one can say an economic analysis might be correct while also saying the other things that they thought about various races of people were incorrect. That's something you can do, actually. It's pretty easy. I'm sorry, but economic theory shouldn't be treated as, written in stone and gospel.
Semitic of the socialist founding fathers was more anti-Semitic than the most anti-Semitic of America's founding fathers. Dramatic margin. So one, it is a explicitly anti-Semitic in its roots, modern leftism. But even today, if you look at anti-Jewish hate crimes, they are far more likely to be committed by leftists than they are by rightists. So to say that Nazis,
I would need to see data to that point, because I have never seen data to that effect.
Were right in their form of socialism because it was anti-Semitic is frankly comical. So let's go into this.
Also, again, I love that he's like, name one attribute that's conservative. And then he's like, but you can't name anti-Semitism, though, because anti-Semitism is leftist in nature, and then provides no actual basis for that idea.
Fascism's classification is a distinct ideology, particularly the far right.
Is she gonna say anything? How long does it take for her to say a single goddamn word on this show?
Part of it was a post hoc academic construction.
All right, that doesn't count. I want her to be able to communicate a single sentence. There we go.
Largely driven by left-leaning scholars in the mid-20th century to rehabilitate socialism's image after World War II by severing fascism from its socialist roots and rebranding it, obscured the shared collectivist.
I'm sorry. Wait. He's clearly reading something. What is he reading from?
Frankly comical. So let's go into this. Fascism's classification is a distinct ideology.
I'm gonna Google this phrase he's using.
Unironically, the baby is more entertaining than this hollowed out melon head.
Oh, good. All right. Do we have another one? Because when I look up this quote, all I get is a direct quote from the transcript of this show. Fascinating.
Particularly the far right part of it was a post hoc academic construction, largely driven by left-leaning scholars in the mid.
Oh, Cliff, you might be absolutely correct. This might be AI bullshit. Wait, he said earlier he asked AI about it? Wait. Oh my god. You're right. I was so befuddled by everything else.
I'll try to engage an AI on this topic or something like that.
Oh god, this is just AI slop. He had a machine do thinking for him with his biases in order to try and reaffirm them. Oh, dude. This sucks. These rich out of touch assholes.
20th century to rehabilitate socialism's image after World War II by severing fascism from its socialist roots and rebranding it, obscured the shared collectivist, state interventionist, and anti-capitalist elements between the two, allowing socialism to be portrayed as inherently progressive and egalitarian, while fascism was demonized as reactionary. And so when you ask, go into AI and you say, what's the difference between fascism?
You go into AI, you ask AI to hallucinate an argument for you.
And socialism, it will give you 5 core points. And so this is what we're going to be looking.
rather than actually understand this or read any books about it, because, people have written a lot of books about fascism, let's just have AI regurgitate slop.
At here, right?
Okay. I never thought to ask this. You're kind of blowing my mind, because all of the socialist YouTubers that I follow are constantly calling MAGA fascist. I was just watching another video this morning where that happened. So, like, what?
Yeah.
Wow, you're really blowing my mind with your massive AI brain.
Yeah, so it's both a what, but also a very obvious thing, right? Like,
Okay.
when you dig down into it, and by the way, if you haven't seen our video on Starship Troopers that we use to explore fascism as a concept much more, I strongly suggest you watch it. It's one of the best we've ever made. But anyway, to continue here, it has an authoritarian structure. A single leader or party with absolute power, often portraying themselves as the embodiment of a nation's will. Opposition is crushed via secret police, censorship, and violence. Now, you could say, does this mirror modern socialism? So who is the face of modern socialism? You're looking at Hassan Piker, right? Like,
look, you guys, you gotta look out these days. You never know when Hassan Piker's secret police could come and get you. All right, I can't. I did not pre-watch this. I did not seek this out. This is genuinely extraordinarily funny. Holy shit.
Like, I think it'd be hard to argue that somebody else is the face of modern socialism. He's the number one left-leaning streamer. So Hassan Piker recently did a trip to the CCP where he went on and on about how great the CCP was. So, and how much better the CCP was than the United States. So note here, the United States is a capitalist democracy, maybe an imperfect democracy, but it is a democracy. He said that the CCP, in contrast, was a much better way to structure a government. So
yeah, it's one of the things that Hassan is wrong about. Like, when I criticize his foreign policy takes, that's one of them. Like, I don't think we should get it twisted. Like, yeah, China's really great at building infrastructure and, like, has been pushing innovation forward for a while now, but, like, it's not a democracy, and I personally, as a socialist, have a colossal problem with that.
See if that fits criteria 1. A single leader or party with absolute power, often portraying themselves as the embodiment of a nation's will. Opposition is crushed via secret police, censorship, and violence. That is exactly fascism. It's not related to...
Yeah, China is a one-party, like, country. They have a uniparty, literal uniparty, and their leader has been in power for, like, the last 20 years.
Fascism along this differentiating point. It is exactly fascism. In addition to the using authoritarian, technocratic controlled, hierarchical governments ruled by unelected officials to crush free speech, is that not what we see actively going on in the UK right now, which is much more left-wing than the United States, is unelected officials very frequently implementing extremely draconian legal restrictions where, for example, somebody was arrested for writing simply on their wall, Islam can be questioned. And this is something I'll get to deeper here. Obviously, you wouldn't be arrested.
Yeah, but also
Why does Hassan have to be the face of the left, big sigh?
The UK is undergoing its current fascist moment as well. Like, the laws there are being passed by a conservative majority that has power in the government. Like, yeah, the draconian free speech, breaking, we'll say, that's a conservative push, if you know anything about UK politics. Like, the idea that the UK is a strong left wing is only true if you're a dunderhead who's like, well, they have an NHS that, you could go to the doctor there. Like, that's the thing that you think is left wing about the country. Like, that's it. It is a very conservative. It is a country very conservative in its politics.
If you had wrote Christianity can be questioned. Obviously, you wouldn't be arrested.
Do China's workers own the means of production? Fuck no, they don't.
If you had written Judaism can be questioned, right? So the other thing I'll write here is they'll say, well, it's an egalitarian belief system. And I'll point out that no, when you look at the decolonialist mindset, what you actually see is a very explicit racialist agenda that highly mirrors the racialist agenda we saw was in Nazism. So
no, the decolonial agenda is simply a dismantling of the colonial structures that were imposed against the will of the people who were originally there. You decolonize by undoing those structures and returning democratic control to the people. That's how that works. That doesn't mean you are implementing like a racial cleansing program in the country. Again, this is the same fear that Elon Musk expresses, that when you get a majority non-white population, that there's going to be like a racial purge of the whites. And like, that's just not going to happen. Like, that's not how people work. But it is how racists believe people work.
To continue here, Unitarianism and often racism. So they'll say the nation or the ethnic group is exalted as superior with myths of historical greatness or victimhood used to justify expansionism and exclusion. So hold on here.
Technically, you could have a freedom-loving dictator. You could have an authoritarian democracy. Disagree.
Myth of a victimhood. And I think that this is really important because it requires understanding the way that Nazism was actually structured.
Okay.
Nazism, when it explained to its people, because we have a lot of writings on this, this isn't like a mystery how Hitler got people angry at the Jews, right?
Okay,
He
yeah.
said the Jews control a disproportionate amount of wealth. They have historically oppressed us. Look at them sabotaging us in our wars and stuff like that. And they have permanent.
Look at them sabotaging us in our wars. He was just using the grievance over the Versailles Treaty to galvanize people against like a perceived other that wasn't a widely accepted in-group. He was pulling on literally 1,000 years, 2,000 years almost of ethnic grievance against Jewish people that was commonplace in Europe in order to have a scapegoat for Germany's problems. That's it. People were looking for a scapegoat, and he gave them one.
Made the German people an underclass through systemic discrimination. This is the exact argument that is being used by the modern leftist movement. But it's worse than that. If you look at the modern leftist movement, much more so than class struggle as
I've been doing dishes and just noticed this baby. Ha ha ha, what the fuck is a baby doing in this stream, huh? Well, you have to understand these two are famous for going to NatalCon because they're pro-natalists, and CNN and a variety of other mainstream news sites inexplicably did profiles on them and their fears about birth rates, specifically of white people. Part of the reason they did that is because, hey, they're wealthy as fuck.
As a phenomenon or as something that's talked about, what they talk about is, and we go into this a lot in the episode we did on Zoran Mandani, another one I strongly recommended we watch, where we go over the colonialist, decolonialist mindset that his father lays out in a number of his books, which are very interesting. And essentially, I'm
at the point now where I don't think any conservative that has a show like these guys, I don't think they read books anymore, guys. I don't think they read anymore. I think they type into ChatGPT, have it regurgitate a summary, and then they act like they've read the book. I think they're just like full on, like elbow deep in the AI brain rot and bullshit.
Separates the world into two groups.
Is this the same guy who's transphobic to Lily Tino?
I would love watching these Teo
I
talk
don't
about
know.
Zoran.
One, I don't know who that is, and two, probably they're very transphobic.
One group is the United States and Europe and the Jews.
Okay.
And this group had, historic economic power and went around and colonized various regions of the world. And through that colonization, permanently made anyone who was from one of these regions an underclass in a way that they cannot escape without a violent overthrow and restructuring of the system, which we'll get to in a second. And this can make sense if you're viewing the world like they do. So you're like, okay, why are certain groups not able to achieve economic prosperity when there are no cultural or genetic differences between groups? Because modern leftism takes this as a truism. And so it says, if that is the case, then how is it true that some groups ended up with more power than other groups, right?
Because chance, circumstance are factors that exist. Like, yeah, certain groups of people developed certain technologies at different times, or never developed them at all. And like, that will give someone, like certain groups, advantages or disadvantages compared to other groups if it comes to a matter of combat, right? And when we're looking at the European colonization efforts, European colonization occurred after a long period of warfare and efforts of modernize military and develop more and more deadly ways to blow apart, fortresses and men. And when they then turned that technology outward in order to engage in primitive accumulation at a mass scale, i.e. mercantilism, the idea was that you go out, you make a colony, and that colony exists to extract the natural resources and wealth of that region. And the colonization effort creates, by design, and you can read about this, that people wrote about it explicitly and wrote about their methods and wrote about how they did it. I, again, encourage people to read King Leopold's Ghost. Excellent book, exactly on this in particular. But King Leopold's Ghost, they go in, they violently suppress the population that is relatively new to their technology and force of arms. And then once they have achieved control and created a system to maintain that control, then they begin squeezing the local population for resources. And they do this in a number of ways. They do this through threats of violence, through the inaction of violence, and through baseline economic incentives that allow certain members of the population to escape from the worst of the worst abuses. But by and large, this is extraordinarily punishing on the population. This leads to, children in the Belgian Congo growing up without hands because they'd been chopped off for not getting enough rubber. This leads to people committing suicide on a mass scale to avoid being enslaved by these colonial forces. This results in population drops of colossal proportions due to the mass death and destitution enforced on population. And this method of extraction is not kind, it's not polite, it's not done for the mutual benefit of both societies. It is done at the barrel of a gun. And again, like the idea like, oh, well, how do these groups become so disparate? Well, it's because like people living in like a jungle don't really have that much use for gunpowder. Not really. Like they've been living there and they've been fine for, several thousand years. Like they're okay. They've figured it out. And they're going to continue to build better ways and figure out better ways of doing things because that's what humans do. But like they don't have access to the same resources that a massive centralized kingdom like Spain has. They don't have, especially when you combine that with like the biological warfare of that is part and parcel with colonialism. The introduction of new diseases that kill at a scale hard to imagine. Isn't that the point, though? They want to destroy those populations. It's the base motivation behind racism. Well, they don't necessarily want to destroy those populations, Brassman. they want to subjugate them. They want them to be incorporated into a worldview and political ideology that sees themselves as subordinate to their betters. Which is why, again, like, you have, narratives of like the white man's burden, etc.
Well, it must have come from this period of colonialization. And we'll do a separate video on this because I think it's a very interesting concept and topic. But one of the things we point out is we can know factually this isn't the case. How can you know that factually some groups doing poorly is not due to colonialism? Well, it's very easy. All you have to do is go region by region and ask yourself a question. Do the countries that were colonized share more in common with other countries that were colonized?
The jungle is not conducive to the invention of gunpowder and guns in the way that warfare on an open European plain is. It's all about circumstances, people.
I mean, yeah, like, I don't know, like, why did so many civilizations flourish in the Fertile Crescent? It's circumstance. People found themselves in the Fertile Crescent. It lent itself to settling down and building, stable civilizations, at least the kind of stable civilizations we can still find evidence of that left behind monuments and writing and and such that we can still find. Rwanda is another good example. You can forcefully create a tiered class system out of, I'm not sure what blue air means, but I follow you right up to that phrase, Anders.
Under similar economic systems, or do they share more in common with cultures that are ethnically and culturally and genetically similar to them? So I'll explain what I mean by that.
Again, these guys are racists, like old school pseudoscientists. I would not be surprised if they owned calipers. Got to measure the skull shapes.
Okay.
Are the regions in East Asia or Latin America that were colonized, or India, like South Asia, that were colonized, are they closer to colonized regions across the globe, right? Or are they closer to uncolonized regions nearby them? And the answer is very obvious. For example, Ethiopia was never a colonized country, and yet it is much closer in terms of economic development, in terms of its existing challenges and political challenges to the colonized countries within Africa than either is to either the uncolonized or colonized countries in East Asia, which are both much closer to each other. Also, if you look across colonized countries, the Latin American colonized countries are much closer to each other than they are to either the colonized or uncolonized parts of Africa.
Well, also, you can only go along with this assumption if you assume that colonies were managed the same everywhere, and they weren't. Every nation and region was colonized differently. Like, different groups of people were subjugated in different ways. I feel like this should be a very obvious conclusion to come to. And again, I have to reiterate, this seems to be because he's directly offloading any of the effort of actually thinking of these ideas to an AI. That is my analysis here.
Or the Middle East or East Asia. The duration to which a country was colonized actually does not correlate that much with their existing, but through that we can tell that colonization as a structure is not the core source of the existing economic disparities. But if you build a world framework around that, then what you can build is a racialist world framework where all of the quote unquote colonized people can come together to defeat the colonizers, right? Often through overthrow, through everything like that. There is the people who've been stolen from versus the people who do the stealing, right? Yeah. And it is a racialist mindset that almost precisely mirrors the mindset of the Nazis or of Mussolini's party, but even more so the Nazis. It's very similar to Nazi ideology. But there's a second, what I've always...
I'm also just gonna I need to take a moment. Do any of you understand like Ethiopia, like just geographically Ethiopia? Anyone? Do any of you understand, like, hey, why was Ethiopia so hard for Europeans to colonize? Let me see if I can bring up an appropriate map here. So, a lot of folks might not realize this, but Ethiopia is basically a gigantic goddamn natural fortress. Like, when you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, no, that would be really, really hard to conquer. You know, what with the fact that, like, you have a pre-existing, like, government and society here that has lived here for thousands of years and, like, built up an immense amount of knowledge about this region, and it's surrounded by mountains, and also, like, again, thousands of years of being able to dig in, build different settlements and areas that can be used as defensive strongholds. Like, this is if you're European and you're trying to conquer a place, just geographically speaking, this would be a huge endeavor. And it's why Ethiopia, to my knowledge, has only ever been occupied once by European powers, and that was by Italy during World War II, like, I believe just during World War II. And even when Italy occupied Ethiopia, the guerrilla warfare was brutal. It was brutal. And eventually the Ethiopians won, right? So, like, when they're like, well, why wasn't colonization different or the same? And it's like, because the places were different. Like, the people had different societies. They had different, like, technological achievements. They had different bases of knowledge about the universe and the world. And they had different, like, building structures.
Reminds me of the Germans invading Russia, at least on a conceptual basis.
It's just not... Like, I feel like it's such a baseline childish thing to have to say, but different places are different.
Found humorous thing about the colonizer mindset is it is explicitly ahistorical. When they talk about the colonizer people, right, like one of the groups that they will always include today among the colonized groups is Hispanics, right? There were
yes, Latin America was colonized. Yes.
The problem is Hispanics are, like, literally no less a colonizer than the Americans or the Canadians.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. It's true.
Most countries are literally made up of populations that migrated predominantly for Europe and then mixed with Native American and slaves who they owned, which most countries are very the same. People always wonder, they're like, Malcolm, why do you say that America and Latin America are culturally...
Wow, that's racist? Yeah, no, it's extraordinarily racist.
so similar. I'm like, both countries made up of European immigrants that had slaves and interbred with natives. There might have been a, like, 20% higher rate of interbreeding with the Latin American, but that's not enough to create a fundamentally different culture. The thing that differs...
Okay, also, I feel like I shouldn't have to point this out, but I think I gotta for the racists. Having children with a slave doesn't magically make a new culture, number one. Number two, like, your genetics don't determine your culture. Number three, people who are the product of rape and then treated as second or third class members of society during an ongoing active genocide of their peoples are still victims of colonization when the colonization process is doing the genocide and the rapes and the enslaving. That seems pretty obvious to me, I guess.
Differentiates Latin American and American culture predominantly is just Catholicism.
Yeah.
No. you also like I'm sorry, like you also have colorism. You also have like people in Latin America who are treated differently based on how light skinned they are versus how dark skinned they are. You have the differences between you know, indigenous folks and indigenous communities that have persisted and survived versus you know, Latin American like individuals outside of those indigenous communities. You've got a lot of different things going on, and to boil it all down to some are Catholic is not at all accurate. And like, also, I just have to say, like, yeah, there are still going to be people who are descended from colonizers and who culturally were treated throughout time as better, higher ranking members of society as a result of that. But you're also going to have people descended from colonizers who are not treated that way. That cultural distinction isn't necessarily related to the genetics. Colorism is pretty much like racism. Yes, yes. It is a type of that, yes. Off topic, what are your thoughts on expanding human and earthly life presence to space and beyond? My thoughts on that are that we got to sort out this whole capitalism thing. Otherwise, space is going to suck for all of us.
I'm gonna say that. It's just Catholicism.
It's just Catholicism, and people know.
She hasn't contributed a single thought outside of validating this man's delusions. It's really weird.
My thoughts on Catholicism and Catholic countries and everything like that, so they can be like, okay, well, that explains a lot. But the point I'm making here is, and then this also explains, when we go into this is our own Madonna episode, but I want to go into it a little here, why they think that they have a mandate to screw over systems that they see as paid into by colonizer ethnic groups. Like, there's been the recent thing where all the Somalians have been cheating. I think it was
Pronatology. Yeah, races are bullshit. But in the United States, people like these guys view everything through a racial lens.
Around $500 million out of Minnesota by claiming to have autistic children and then sending it to terrorist groups, Islamist terrorist groups that are, out there committing genocides, using your taxpayer dollars and stealing from autistic children. But how does this make sense to them? It's like a moral thing to do, and it makes sense as a moral thing to do because no matter how
I am not skipping any of this. All the weird cuts are them.
How much damage or how much suffering or how much death they cause to a colonizer people until the system has been inverted, that is ethical. And this systemic inversion also.
You don't need to invert it. What needs to happen is a deconstruction of the oppressive structures that have been pervasive throughout society since colonization.
At one point I honestly forgot she was in the video cause I am just background listening. She contributes like Asmongold, it's just yes and
But you got, it's not an inversion. What you're seeking is not to invert society. And again, this is why people like Elon Musk get so afraid about demographic shifts where white people are no longer the majority, because they believe that is heralding the inversion of the colonial policy. Essentially that folks who have up until now been treated as second-class citizens will now do the same to white people. And it's, again, they can't conceive of the idea that decolonization is simply taking out those pervasive and destructive systems that continue to this day from the colonial period, that perpetuate colonial power and colonial class and ethnic distinction. And you don't need those. What you need is democracy and freedom and the ability of people to treat each other as equals under the law. And they can't wrap their head around that.
Really mirrors Nazi ideology. There's this group that used to be at the top, and then they inverted. And I love whenever I bring this up with GPT, it's like, well, hold on.
Whenever I bring this up with GPT, Chat GPT, he's not even calling it Chat GPT anymore. He's just calling it GPT. These people are AI brained and they're cooked. It's crazy. I think I'm gonna finish this section of the video, which goes on for another 3-ish minutes, and then I'm gonna be done. Because, like, this is bullshit, frankly, and I don't want to waste my time engaging with AI drivel.
Here, it'll say something like, but the Nazi ideology, was based on a myth that one group had power. But if you look at the United States, blacks really do earn less than whites. And I was like, it was not based on a myth. Jews really did earn more than Aryans in pre-Nazi.
Why might that be? Could it be that in Europe, historically, the way in which Jewish people were othered led to Jewish people being disproportionately represented in banking, a field that allowed them to make more money while also still getting a huge amount of the racist bullshit that would lead to them periodically getting wiped out in different regions of Europe via pogroms and purges? This is a result of like 2,000 years of racism because Christians weren't allowed to charge interest, which means that Jewish people were forced to do the thing for Christians because Christians thought it was inherently sinful and Jewish people didn't. Aryans weren't even a real ethnicity in Germany. No, because again, these people are buying into like the esoteric Nazism already. Like they're fascist racists. Like it's pretty obvious through everything they say. But even as Jewish wealth grew as a result of being allowed to become bankers and to charge interest, Christians still looked down on the fact that Jews were bankers because Christians were taught it was sinful and evil to do this, even though they needed the banks. And that's why a lot of Jewish people got forced into that. And it's just, it's just wild to me. Like, come on, understand what you're talking about. Midnight and All Night, thank you for subscribing.
Germany, this is well documented and was well attested as one of the reasons they wanted to target them. The logic mirrors exactly. But to continue here, what's the next thing? Militarism and anti-pacifism. Society is organized around military values, with war glorified as a means to national rejuvenation. The problem is, if you listen to...
Also, again, like, yeah, different. There are going to be... Guys, I know this might blow your mind. If you look at any country on Earth, different demographics are going to be doing, better or worse economically. Did you guys know that? Not an excuse to like wipe them off the face of the earth or like try and purge them from your society. But like these guys think that is a compelling reason.
To Hassan Piker, if you listen to leading socialist figures today, militarism is heavily glorified. You will see Hassan Piker literally will interview and glaze a Houthi pirate, for example.
Oh,
They will. This is somebody who kills and grapes innocent people, right? Like,
I forgot about that. That was Huh.
He will.
Citation needed that man had killed or graped anybody. By the way,
literally refuse to condemn, and many, I think he'll praise Hezbollah, he'll praise other terrorist organizations that act with extreme violence. He even said the Hezbollah flag was his favorite flag because it had an AK gun on it, right? Literally.
Do you think that might have been a joke, though? Because that's a really stupid reason to like a flag.
He's saying his favorite flag is his favorite flag because it has a weapon of mass death on it. This is modern socialism. And what we'll be going in here in a bit is to point out that this isn't just modern socialism. This was socialism. If you go back to the academics who created the very concept of socialism, they also said similar things. The only place where you don't get this is where socialism existed within Western academia and had to tone its ideology.
Everything he said is wrong, and it's wild to me.
ideology down. But socialism has always been militaristic in implementation historically.
Right, because Americans don't like guns or the military.
Yeah, it just kind of seems like maybe America has done more killing under the American flag than the AK-47 just as a gun has done.
Also going to go into
I don't know,
where
just
socialism was implemented and point out too that in many cases it led to much more deaths than fascist implementation. So then you have anti-egalitarianism, which is to say rejects class struggle. Now, this is really interesting because modern socialism and historical socialism in many ways is actually anti-class struggle. So look at some.
I'm going to let him finish this point. But honestly, making this point or attempting to make this point is so facially disqualifying and discrediting that I like, no. Oh my God.
Somebody like Hassan, who's, constantly asking for donations.
So socialism is entirely about overthrowing capitalist ownership or achieving by some other means ownership of your workplace by the people who work there. That's it. It does not mean what he's saying it means.
From his subscribers, despite being born into immense wealth, despite having immense wealth, despite never doing any major social donations himself, right? Like, how does this ethically make sense if you actually believe in a class struggle and we're dedicated to resolving it, right? How does this?
Yeah, how would someone who streams 7 to 9 hours a day about why people should be socialist and the benefits we could pursue if we were, push forward socialism? How does someone whose entire job is dedicated to talking about pushing forward socialism at all helping class struggle? Gee, I wonder. Also, I'm just saying, if a guy is spending his days 24/7 advocating for class struggle, and then supporting people who are on the picket line, and then, advocating against colonial power, and advocating against, the imperial abuse of power that we see all over the world in different ways, in different places, and manifesting differently based, again, on different circumstances. But no, how does that push forward socialism? Because again, and I don't know who needs to know this, a big part of class struggle is building class consciousness. It is literally education of the public. It is education of the public and then spurring them to take action. Maybe he's secret besties with Jeff Bezos. True, it could be.
This ideology makes sense. How does an ideology?
If you're so right. If a socialist doesn't give everything he owns in order to fuel the cause, are they even socialist?
Where, and the way you make it make sense is with the colonialist mindset, the colonialist, post-colonialist mindset. Right now, all of a sudden, it makes sense. You can say, well, it was never really about class struggle. When we said class struggle, that was a euphemism for ethnic struggle.
No, it's not.
Which, by the way, Hitler and Mussolini also did. What they
Okay. I think I have to be done. No, don't let this guy cook. I can't tonight. If you guys want me to come back to this, I will. But this is dog shit. This is some baby's first attempt at deconstructing what fascism is, except the baby got into ChatGPT and now is full of hallucinations and self-affirming bullshit and got taught wrong as a joke. Can we never cover the pronatalists again? I can't promise you I won't. Can't promise you I won't. Does he actually believe his own words? Yes. Absolutely this guy does. Oh, wait. Oh, I see. I misread the punctuation. No. Don't let this guy cook. There we go. That makes a lot more sense. We trained him wrong on purpose as a joke. I think about that a lot. That line from Kung Pao, Enter the Fist. I think about that line all the time because it applies to so many conservatives and the way that they think. Conservative pundits, you know? I just... You gotta have been taught wrong, like, how to think in order to arrive at some of these conclusions. And this, I think, is a perfect example of conservatives morphing into hogs at the AI slop trough. You know? Anything that reaffirms their biases and opinions, they gotta lap it out of that AI slop trough, you know? Those sweet, sweet chat GPT grains out of the slop trough. That's not fair. This guy's self-affirming bullshit has a name. I don't know what it is, but she's sitting beside him. We made it through almost 20 minutes of this video, and she did not actually contribute at all to this conversation or video. It's genuinely insane. God, can we watch their video about Starship Troopers at some point in the future? I don't know. If more of you guys bother me to do that than just you, Mr. Malachite, I'd consider it. But I think that it might make me stroke out if we do. So we'll see. All that being said, I hope this was helpful to any of you. I hope this was helpful to any of you trying to deconstruct or understand the conservative mindset. Because, like, genuinely, these people are victims of ChatGPT and bigotry, and I don't know how the bigotry entered their lives, but I sure as shit know how the AI entered their lives. And this is your PSA. Don't allow yourself or a loved one to become AI brained. All right?
Can we watch their video on Zoran Mamdani?
Absolutely not. And with that, folks, if you got anything out of this, remember to like, leave a comment. Definitely leave a comment. It's super important in the algorithm. Consider subscribing. We just passed 20,000 subscribers. Really cool. Thank you all for being a part of this, and let's keep on getting bigger and bigger. Let's go! And here's your reminder. Join your local Dems. Join your local DSA. Radicalize your Dems. Make your DSA more effective. If you need help, join our Discord. Reach out to GamerG for help with DSA. Reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems. We got sections in the Discord dedicated to talking about organizing in those different groups. Make use of them. And finally, check out ImogeneOlivia.com, gender euphoric lingerie design from the ground up for trans femmes. It's also tested on cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. A lot of great reviews so far. Check it out, ImogeneOlivia.com. There's a link down in the doobly-doo. And with that, folks, let's keep on going.
Riverboat Jack is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack.